It goes on for quite some time in this fashion. And I don't mind it, but, there's another minute of... and then I got blisters on my fingers, the big ending.
Is that still Johnny Cash?
But I think we all know... No, it's the band. You really hated that Johnny Cash track, didn't you?
Well, it was a bit strange, wasn't it? He missed out a lot of the notes. He thought, they were like missing teeth. I thought, I can't... that one's gone.
He's Johnny Cash. He's one of those people, I think you do what you want, you're Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
You remember, we were talking the other week about I went to see James Brown, and he was terrible, but it was still... James Brown, you do what you want.
But you're right about music in lifts. I mean, it is...
Who's right? Because we were violently in disagreement.
Oh, what? Who's right?
Well, I'm against. He's not bothered.
Oh, I kind of... music in a lift... I mean, I often wonder if you were Bruce Springsteen or Ozzy Osbourne and you get into a lift and they're playing one of your classics and you think, what have they done to this?
I think you'd probably love it, wouldn't you?
But they must be on Prozac.
Music paranoid?
Yeah. No, but I think there is some sort of compliment. You must have all had, like, a mainstream comic stealing one of your jokes and there's a bit of, like, he stole my joke. Hey, he stole my joke.
Can you imagine that if you got into a lift and somebody was doing one of your routines, but really
but what
slowly?
a music version. Well, that'd be dreadful, wouldn't it?
With all the bile taken out.
With all the bile, yeah.
We must say, Rory Bremner in the studio. We haven't mentioned it yet.
And it turned out to be... and the music version would end up... And it turned out to be Jamie Oliver.
I suppose an impressionist is a Muzak version of a real thing, isn't it? You just kind of do it differently.
No, it's the other way, isn't it? Because good impressions are... some impressions are. Yeah, your Les Dennis impressions, they are Muzak impressions, aren't they?
Yeah.
But other impressions, they're sort of punk
reality
versions of
light.
someone. Yeah, I mean, he'll just do that. Right, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back, Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's the way he does
I
his
heard him once
impressions.
on Michael Parkinson on the radio one afternoon, Les Dennis, and Parkinson was being really obsequious. And I like him as well, but he did this thing. This isn't an attempt at an impression. It's just a generic...
Parky, go on.
Oh, I don't know. My next guest is Les Dennis, who is going to do... And he did some impressions.
That's
That was very good.
We were both nodding.
Is that right? Oh,
Yeah,
blimey.
that's fantastic.
But now he's going to be doing it. I've got another 2 hours and 20 minutes with
He
me.
shouldn't have done that. So, and he said, Les, can you do anybody? And so Les went, and he said, for instance, if I was to say Neil Kinnock, and so he just did this generic, the sort of thing, and then this was also years after Neil Kinnock's no longer leader of the Labour Party, and he just did this generic thing, the sort of thing your dad would do for a Welsh person.
Yeah.
Was this radio?
I'm leader of the Labour Party, and...
that wasn't that bad either.
Oh, no, I could... No,
No, but at least
I used to do
Les
Kinnock.
Dennis would have ruffled his hair, because that's
He
always the
might
key,
have
is to say, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Neil Kinnock, and then they ruffle the hair.
But this was on the radio.
To completely... Well, he might have still have done it. It's old
But the
habits
thing
die hard.
this thing with Parkinson going, he could just do anybody for that. And I thought, what? This is just...
No, that's true. He can do anyone to a certain level.
You've got to stop telling people who you are, that's the thing.
Yeah.
You've got to try and...
Can you do impressions at all, Rory?
Oh, I'm sort of...
Ever had a go?
I'm not very good at it, really. I think there's so many of them around now, aren't they?
There are now. They've all stolen your thunder. It's weird, isn't it? Suddenly it's become the hot
And it's
ticket.
over the month, Alistair McGowan, Dead Ringers, and it's just, I don't know, we move along, the world goes in cycles. I mean, when I started out, it was Phil Cool. Actually, the first stuff I ever did was with Mark. Do you remember Edinburgh? We did it with the Masonic Lodge. Not that we were Masons or anything, but it was with me and Mark and Jenny Eclair. And a thing called Dubious Entertainment, and that was Edinburgh, 16 years ago? Something like that.
Something like that. And I think we got an average of about 25 people a night in, and we all thought it was fantastic.
I bet you had to tell them who you're doing then.
I did then, yeah. And now they know it's just me. I think, it's him doing an impression of... Who was it? Oh, I don't know. Alistair McGowan.
Who would that have been back in them? And now Harold Macmillan, ladies and gentlemen.
I suppose when you start, you can do anyone from day one, can't you? Because you're just building your act and you're getting used to doing impressions.
But it's always the Mr. bit I used to. And now, Mr. Tony Blair. Well, I just like to say one or two words. Mr. this, Mr. that. But anyway, no, it moves on. I mean, we've always liked to kind of... the BBC shows I used to do were very sort of Sean Connery and Peter Allis and kind of the people I grew up with. But now I've always liked to use the voices more as a vehicle for kind of the story that we're telling. And that's what I'm particularly doing now.
You do much less entertainment. People now are much more...
You're saying it's not funny now, right?
No, I'm saying you don't impersonate people from entertainment. I didn't mean that.
No, because, I kind of, like Mark, actually, there's a similarity in a way that I still believe there are people who are interested in actually what's happening in the news and in current affairs and in politics and all the rest of it. And the thing is that television is so fragmented now that, I mean, there's so many different channels that it's difficult to choose who you're going to do as an impressionist that enough people will recognise. I mean, you can do, some people might do somebody who's only seen on Channel 4, some people do somebody that's only seen on MTV. And I suppose over the years I've just got more and more interested in sort of news and politics and current affairs. And kind of when Mike Yarwood was working, everybody knew who Morecambe and Wise were. Everybody knew who Bob Monkhouse was and David Attenborough and all those characters. And it's now so fragmented that the only way really that the only characters that I share in common with the audience are the Robin Cooks, the Tony Blairs, the Ian Duncan Smiths, the George Bushes, the Bill Clintons, those kind of things. And that's just what I'm interested in. I'm interested in kind of telling a story and finding out. I'm interested in finding out things. The thing we're doing at the moment, the Iraq show, is I just wanted to know what was happening.
But we should give it the full title because the Iraq show makes it sound a little bit like,
I know.
Come on and dance and sing.
Sunday night from the Baghdad Palladium.
Yes, Al Qaeda and the 40Ks. No, the show we're doing, it's tomorrow night. It's on 8 o'clock on Channel 4, and it's called Between Iraq and a Hard Place. And it's because we just wanted to know what on earth was going on, what the background was. And the more, again, Mark will know about this, the more you look into this kind of stuff, the more you look into the background, the history of Iraq, and the more you look into the American administration, the more your eyes open and your jaw just hits the ground. It's just quite extraordinary. I mean, do you know who the first person was to suggest gassing the Kurds? Have a guess.
Well, I know the answer to this, I'm afraid
Do
to
you?
say.
The greatest Britain.
Churchill.
Absolutely, yeah.
Really?
And they didn't do it, but not because it was humanitarian, but because they couldn't actually get the technology to work, because they used to just fling bombs out of old Hadley Page biplanes in those days from an airbase outside Habaniyah. And also, when Saddam Hussein got 100% of the vote the other day, this is actually a throwback to in Britain in 1921.
Do you think he shouted, landslide?
Saddam Hussein, Bath Party. But of course, I mean, they were all sort of like, everyone was pushed in and children were put in because, as Peter Snow says, you've got to throw in the baby with the Bath voter. Pause for laughter. But in 1921, Britain decided the best way to unite Iraq, apart from bombing the crap out of it, which we've been doing for quite a few years, was to actually put a king in. And they said, well, we'll have an election as well. But there was another candidate. And so the British kidnapped him and took him to Ceylon. And so they held an election, and King Faisal won with 96.8% of the vote, which means that a lot of the things that Saddam is doing now...
So it's a swing. He's done much better then.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of things he's doing now is what Tony Blair would describe as traditional values in a modern context.
So the thing with it,
is all this going to be in the show tomorrow night?
Absolutely,
that sounds like a great education as well as.
Well, I mean, at the moment, well, here's the situation. So we may or may not be about to go to war with Saddam, who may or may not have weapons of mass destruction, which he may or may not be about to use or give to terrorist organisations, which he may or may not have links with. So that's fairly certain, isn't it? As a start, I keep hoping that the week before war starts, although war we haven't stopped. We spent £4 million a week. No, £4 million a week last year we spent bombing Iraq, which must really piss off the firemen, don't you think? Unless, of course, they've got a second job flying bombers.
Well, the Iraqis more, I'd say.
Indeed.
If you're looking for an aggrieved people.
If you're looking for an aggrieved people. But I keep hoping that the week before war breaks out, that the Queen will remember a conversation that she had with Saddam Hussein 5 years ago, where he was assuring her that they only had these things for safekeeping and he didn't intend using them. But it all looks fairly grim at the moment. And we just wanted to find out what was happening, the history, a bit about Saddam, about the Bush administration. And I think going back to the using impressions, I mean, George Bush's, and then I've done Bin Laden for the first time, which we did in Arabic. So we got an Arab translator to translate our script. I don't know if he's done it, actually. He could have put anything up. I just had write.
There might be hidden messages in it now that start the war.
Absolutely. Well, because he
now, that would be ironic, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be? Wouldn't there be egg on your face then?
Do you think he'd be flattered?
I don't know. Or Bin Laden. I don't know. I mean, wherever he is.
I think there's been a lot of jokes about him in the last few years.
No, but impressions.
I thought he said flattened for a minute. I thought,
I think he'd probably be flattened.
But no, so we did this phonetically, Bin Laden on the auto cue, and it was sort of Arabic. So I don't know what I'm saying as Bin Laden, but it's just it's one of these tapes, and George Bush is watching it, and he's talking about destroying our enemies, and he thinks he's talking about America, but in fact Bin Laden's talking about Iraq, because of course when Saddam originally invaded Kuwait, Bin Laden said, well, I'll go and get him, because he had all these Afghan troops who were trained by the CIA in Afghanistan. He said, I'll go and sort out Saddam Hussein. And the Saudis said, no, we don't want you to do it. We want the Americans to do it. So they invited the Americans in. The Americans based themselves in Saudi Arabia. Bin Laden got the hump, and 10 years later, the Twin Towers happens.
Now, there was some understatement there, wasn't it? Bin Laden got the hump. There was a great...
can rear up.
He's miffed. Greg Proops was on some, I don't know what it was, some benefit was on the other day, and he said something about that they think Iraq have got weapons of mass destruction as opposed to our weapons of nurturing and caressing.
Exactly.
Which I thought was
the dossier that we were waiting all year for, that was going to have this final proof, and in the end it said, the critical comment in it was, this was back in, September, wasn't it, that Saddam could have nuclear weapons by Christmas if he gets the materials.
I thought it was like,
same as all of us.
I thought it was going to be if there was a centre.
If it gets, but the Women's Institute could have nuclear weapons by Christmas if they get the materials, and they would have to bomb all their fudge.
Just like all of us, he's just waiting for it to turn up. Is it? So, well, I've ordered it. I don't know when it's going to arrive. But what Blair seems to be saying is, look, we believe Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. Now, look, unless we attack him, there's a chance he might not use them, in which case we'll never know whether he's got them or not. So I think it's worth the effort, don't you? And that's the thing. But it is, what we want to do is to do a show which is not preachy. I promise you, if you watch the show through for an hour, you'll just think, I had no idea that any of that was the case, and that was the history, that was the background. And Bird and Fortune do a wonderful piece about the British Army and how prepared they are to fight in the Gulf, because, of course, all the equipment is designed for war in Northern Europe, and they do a fabulous piece about that. And in the end, we decide that history should actually repeat itself, and we should actually restore a monarchy to Iraq, and Prince Charles can go over there, which solves a problem from our point of view.
You've ruined the end now.
Well, no, it's all right. It's, Prince Andrew can have Jordan, because he's always fancied her, so...
There you go.
Happy.
I know, you ended on a thing where we were both going to go boom.
That's brilliant to do a fantastic
So we ruined
15-minute rant about American imperialism in the modern age, and then end with a Jordan pun.
Right, this is Blur.
Everything's in there.
Let's move on. This is Blur.
Robert Fish don't do that, does he?
Blur to the end. What a beautiful song, and one that could have been some sort of totem for the war, but it wasn't. It was a love song. That was Blur with To the End. I'm Mark Lamarr. Mark Steele still with me, as is Rory Bremner, who's got a show on tomorrow night called an edition of Bremner, Bird and Fortune, called Between Iraq and a Hard Place. Has anyone been reading or has anyone read, because it's been out quite a while now, the John Monson book?
John Motson.
John Monson.
I thought you said John Motson for a moment. Interestingly enough.
You
John
did that
Monson.
on purpose. You misheard on purpose.
You
Can't do a John Monson.
Who is John
And
Motson?
now you're going to say, just imagine, just for argument's sake, if John Monson was commentating on the war. Oh, and the cruise missile's gone straight past Saddam's palace. Go on,
Now you've got
no, I can't even do it, though.
Everyone's an impressionist here. John Ronson, tell us about this book. I'm excited now.
Do you not know about them?
I know about the book. I've not read it yet.
It's wonderful.
John Ronson?
Yes.
Because I thought you said Des Lynam. Yeah. Tell you what, Saddam, there's a sort of a terrorist league really going on. North Korea, they've gone into pole position. Sorry, John Ronson.
No, I'll just mention the book, because it's been out for a while, and I think it's been a bestseller and stuff. It's called Them, and it's about his meetings with various extremists over the years, most of which are very funny, because he's an immensely funny writer, isn't he? And he does a thing where he's on the road with David Icke. He did a series about it last year.
Oh, the David Icke thing's quite extraordinary, because there's a book out called, what is it, the 11th of September and Alice in Wonderland or something like that. It's by David Icke, and it's got there are a lot of conspiracy theories going around.
Yeah, this book is all about conspiracy theorists. And
I mean, even, Gore Vidal, he writes some brilliant stuff, and Pilger writes some brilliant stuff, and Michael Moore. There's actually quite a lot. It's not in the newspapers, it's kind of in the books and the articles and stuff like that. Some of it's you can't always rely on the facts and all the rest of it. But the David Icke stuff, you think, a lot of this is actually quite plausible conspiracy theory, until you reach the bit where he believes that the royal family are actually lizards.
Yeah. That's where he really falls down on that, doesn't he?
And I think, would I get back past the Channel 4 lawyers?
There was a brilliant...
It would be quite fun trying, though, wouldn't it?
John Monson
coming up with zoological evidence.
John Monson had a brilliant programme following David Icke around, where a lot of... Anti-Defamation League people were protesting he does his massive speaking tours. He's an enormous hit in America.
Was this defamation of the royal family or defamation of lizards?
Of Jews.
Oh,
and
right.
They were saying, no, this is code. Whenever you use a word like lizards, what he's being is anti-Semitic. And John Monson did this whole programme, and at the end of it he said, I don't think he is. I think he really means lizards. And so there'd be all these protests about people going, you're being anti-Semitic. This is the sort of code words that have been used since the times of Nazi pogroms and everything. And then he was like, no, he's nuts.
Well,
he just believes they're lizards.
And he did also believe that he was the son of God and that turquoise was the holy colour.
It's quite a career path, isn't it? It's from footballer to sports commentator to son of God to lizard conspiracy theorist.
Well, as a lizard, I think it's very anti-Semitic, don't you?
Thoroughly.
Well, it's anti-lizard.
As a Jewish lizard.
Does anyone know that the Taliban in Afghanistan, if you haven't got a beard, they'll put you in prison because it's against their religion to not have a beard. But surely after a couple of weeks your appeal would come through. It's fairly easy to go, no, that mean I have got a beard. What are you on about?
Does that mean that the Archbishop of Canterbury is a member of the Taliban? Because we were just talking just now, during in fact, now that David Blunkett has come out attacking the Archbishop of Canterbury, that should be the next fight. Never mind the Grant Bovey and Ricky Gervais. In the blue corner, David Blunkett. Be Mad David Blunkett against.
Do it as Johnny Vaughan, though, Rory. He was doing
I can't. Well, I'm not so good as Johnny Vaughan actually, but David Blunkett I could do in a way. But he talks about him as a fellow bearded lefty, and I like the idea.
Oh, you
that
need with
bearded
Johnny
lefties
Vaughan.
and Taliban's.
I don't know if I can do it now because now I'm in awe. But it's intonation. I did Andy Kershaw, didn't I? I went straight into me Andy Kershaw there.
You went a bit Blackburn.
Yeah.
Intonation, ladies and gentlemen. But Johnny, it's
Blunkett.
extraordinary.
Here we go. Blunkett, ladies and gentlemen. Great British name. Big round of applause for Blunkett.
It's very good.
That's what you need with Johnny Vaughan.
Have you got a musical ear?
Archbishop of Canterbury. I've gone straight into me Andy Kershaw again. The Archbishop of Canterbury, great British town.
But that's very... You see, actually, there's a lot in common. There's a kind of stream running through. There's you, and there's Danny Baker, and there's Johnny Vaughan. Just kind of unstoppable. I don't know how they do it. Johnny Vaughan and Danny Baker, how they just keep that stuff going. It's like somebody in the pub on top form, and they just keep it going all day, 24 hours. I just don't know how they do it.
You know, he started off with me and those three people in top form, and then he suddenly went, but those two...
He was quite diplomatic.
He didn't mention the top form when he said those.
Because he sounded so like Johnny Vaughan. It reminded me...
Johnny Vaughan.
Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Do you think Blair's really irritated by your impression?
I don't know, really. I mean, if you could be bothered with it.
Well, I don't know. Given that this is the most media-obsessed government in history, probably.
Well, that's the thing, because it is all about
he
image.
watches.
I bet he does.
Well,
I bet he's not got me hands. He's not. That's not. I don't do that.
Actually,
He probably says there's less to me than that.
Well, he is more satirical than I am, because I mean, you can't sort of some of the things that he comes out with. But I met him 10 years ago, well, 96 actually, and his children apparently do impressions of me doing impressions of him, and so one of his kids stood up and said, "I like apple pie, but not if it's got too much cream on it, unless of course you like cream." And he was watching the kid with a kind of mixture of sort of fatherly pride and also thinking, yeah, but don't be too funny, really, will you? So there's a kind of thing. So I think, yeah, the politicians, there's a sort of vanity there as well, so they will sort of watch. But I don't know, I mean, I don't think you can never take yourself that seriously.
It's the time in the show when we have to find out if your programme tomorrow night is relevant to the world situation today. 88 to 91 FM, this is Radio 2 from the BBC. Blondie with One Way or Another, and the Undertones with Get Over You. I'm Mark Lamarr, sitting in for Jonathan for the last time for a couple of months now. Mark's still with me, as is Rory Bremner.
Do you know who does a brilliant version of that Blondie song?
Who?
The Rugrats.
So they really?
Yeah, it's on the Rugrats thing.
But you hate music, and you bring up the Rugrats.
No, it's not a Muzak version, it's an excellent version.
Do they watch the Rugrats?
Yeah. Well, when my lad was about 3, he was obsessed with the Rugrats, and I was sort of out the room, and I thought, oh, it's the Blondie. And I come in, and there was the Rugrats, because the little girl loses a doll, and she's searching
And
for
she
her
can't
one
get over
way
it.
or another. I'm going to find you.
Right.
She looks all through the forest looking for her, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds great.
A theory that, in fact, Saddam Hussein and George Bush should both be, this is after my Christmas, I think they should both be given an 18-month-old daughter to look after with no help at all. And they just wouldn't have time to do anything. They wouldn't have time to plan an invasion, wouldn't have time to hide any weapons. They would be, I mean, have you found that with your 3-year-old, or how old is he now?
He's 6 now. I was going to declare war on Belgium, and then I overslept because I'd been up all night and to never get around to it. I will do it one day though.
The Belgians might have some weapons of mass something. So I think we should.
Well,
I'm going to invade Kuwait, not until you change that nappy.
There was a sentence in a report of the newspaper that began, and I'm sure it's absolutely accurate. London and Washington, this was yesterday's paper, I think. London and Washington are alarmed at the way in which nobody has found any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You know, I thought that's marvellous how it sums it up. You know, oh no, they haven't got any.
Yeah.
Oh no. So clearly, to try and appease the West, what Saddam should say is, "Here, you ain't been looking in here, have you? They're in here in cupboard. We got millions of them. In fact, we got so many. Can you take some off our hands? We got a new shipment coming in."
But maybe it's like 10 Rillington Place, they just haven't looked in the right places. Maybe they're walled up in his bathroom or something.
They should say, well, where's all that stuff we sold you? That must be somewhere. Because a year before the Gulf War, the last one, 1990, America was selling helicopter engines, at least 22 batches of anthrax spores, and 100,000 litres or tons of sarin nerve gas. This was a year before the
How do you
Kuwait
smuggle
thing.
in anthrax?
Oh, no, it wasn't
it's not
smuggled in,
smuggled in,
it was sold. It was sold. It's sort of the American... I mean, lists and lists of the stuff, and that's what's
But the
fascinating
helicopter
about research.
engines, you know, there's no helicopters. It might be like the bloke who lived on the estate who always had like a car engine in his front garden and never got round to it.
They've got them up on bricks, Saddam.
Yeah.
Here's a question. How many ambulances are there in Baghdad that work?
Go on.
2.
I was about to say two.
Because they can't get tyres, stuff like that. I mean, it's just extraordinary sort of stuff under sanctions. Anyway, what were we talking about?
We should
Rugrats.
mention to people listening that Rory's doing a show tomorrow night called Bremner, Bird and Fortune between Iraq and a hard place, which is why we were talking about what's been going on there. Well, I wanted to talk about the politicians you do. Do they ever get annoyed?
I don't know. I mean, I try not to mix with them. Occasionally you mix with people who've either sort of left cabinet or some of the journalists or some of the experts because they've got a story to tell. What you find out is when you meet them is they're all very, very charming, and people like Paddy Ashdown and stuff, and completely charming and completely plausible. And you go away and you think, well, what's he told me? And you think, well, he hasn't really told me very much. And you can't really work in an environment where you're wanting their praise.
Do you think that charm is part of their sort of fakeness, if that's the right word?
Well, yes.
That they have all become, pretty much, politicians have become celebrities nowadays, and they have to be seen to be charming. They can't be like a Russell Crowe politician.
Well, yes, well, they have to be. I mean, hence Charles Kennedy going on, have I got news for you? What did you think of that, of him hosting that? Did you not think that was quite a cop-out? Hello and welcome to Have I Got News for You. I mean, suddenly thought, why is he doing this? This is quite extraordinary. I mean,
I thought the Boris Johnson one was one of the TV highlights of last year, didn't you?
I didn't see it, but everyone says it was
magnificent,
terrific. But could he pull that trick every week? Because he was just saying.
It's not a trick. He is an old oaf. I mean, he is a bumbling, bumptious fool. So it wasn't. I don't think it was really a trick.
But it's the problem when it comes down to the personalities, isn't it? That they, you sort of find this all the time. You sort of meet journalists and people, and they'll say, "Oh no," but you meet them, and they're really actually quite pleasant. And once you get to know, and you think, "Well, no, you missed the point." I'm sure there were journalists who went, "Once you get to know Pol Pot, he's all right, he's lovely."
Well,
I mean, his wife
Bushell
does a
plays that
lovely
game,
dinner.
doesn't he? Bushell always goes on shows and says, "Oh, I'm just comedy villain. Don't be silly. Don't take it all so seriously."
It's one of them. David Frost has his.
I know that is. Who's that?
Huh? Gary Bushell.
Gary Bushell? No, I don't know.
Doesn't ring any bells.
Did he work down the post office? No, David Frost has these wonderful summer garden parties, and the people that he puts together there, he says, "Oh, Rory, come over. Have you met the Pinochets? They're lovely. Come absolutely super." And you see these people talking like, you see like Bob Geldof talking to I don't know, Gaddafi in the corner, and so these fantastic things when you're drawn together, but you can't be drawn into that world. But it's interesting though, because the other thing is people say, "Well, have you ever thought?" I'm sure they said this to you as well, Mark. They say, "Well, have you ever thought of being a politician?" As if you're interested in politics, you have to therefore be a politician.
Be a formal politician.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now if we don't have debate, you think, well, if there's no debate, well, maybe what's the alternative to that? Is that then revolution? But we wouldn't mobilise for revolution in this country. We would sort of mobilise for the Queen Mother's funeral, or for or the Jubilee,
or sales,
Absolutely. But we're missing something. Celebrity Big Brother. And do you see the two people who were voted out of the Today programme thing that they wanted to get? They say, who are you going to vote out of the country, and who are you going to vote to come in? And it was so overwhelmingly to get Blair out and get Mandela in. They said, okay, they've won. Now who is there in second place? And the person they voted to vote out second was Cherie Blair. I mean, so this is our version of the Ceausescus, that we don't string them up by a lamppost. We actually just vote them out of the country on the Radio 4 Today programme.
Well, didn't that annoy? I mean, I know sort of all the stuff about her and the flats and all that. Maybe the story itself was that interesting, but when she come on and did that business about, I'm just a normal mum trying to juggle.
Satirist, that must have been a
I was out of the
you.
country, but it sounded wonderful.
Have you not seen the videos?
No, I haven't.
Oh, God, it's marvellous.
See the videos, but,
a woman pretending to cry for her children. Oh, it's wonderful.
She was
I was
supposed
saying
to be
actually that's what Saddam should have learned from that. He should send his wife up to the next place. Instead of being all bellicose and belligerent and waving around swords and saying we will fight the infidels, he should send Mrs. Saddam on to say, all I was trying to do was just protect my family with just a few weapons of mass destruction, just like any mother would have done, and the whole world would have gone, you've got to see us.
I think you should send that idea to Cherie. You should fax it to her, but I don't think she ever reads the faxes, so...
You talk about the personality of politicians. I did that show, Politically Incorrect, the American, it's not on anymore, the American talk show about whatever's in the news. And they did a series of it over here. And Bill Maher, the host, had done a big speech the night before about how Thatcher was the greatest ever Britain and whatever. So I was on the night after. And the other guests were, I can't remember one of them, Michael Moore was one, and Edwina Curry. Who every time she opened her mouth, there was someone's foot was in it. It wasn't always hers, to be fair. Quite often it was mine. But there was a point when I said, how dare you come to someone else's country, whatever your political beliefs are, and tell people what you think the greatest ever Britain is. You weren't here when Thatcher was in power and ruined the health service, smashed the unions. And Edwina Curry did this little thing where she went, yes, like that, like smash the unions. Anyway, you know, like a child, apart from anything else. But after the show, Michael Moore, whose whole life is based around reconstituting the unions, she went up to him and said, "We must have lunch." and they swapped numbers together. And I'm sure he didn't. I'm sure he was being polite, and not for a second did he ever plan on going out for lunch with her. But it really summed up, you know, those people who...
Should have then said, "Talk dirty to me."
I was on Any Questions once. There's this strange sort of thing where I sort of went down to Sandwich in Kent, you know, like a twee little sort of village tea shop sandwich.
A lot of Radio 2 listeners in Sandwich.
No, I'm not knocking a place, but a twee little place. And it was a strange thing because you go to this hotel first that's about sort of a couple of hundred yards from where the gig was, and there was Gerald Kaufman was on and Frederick Forsyth was on, and some other Tory or other, I can't remember who it was. And they sit there and have this big buffet thing, and they're all chatting with each other, and you sort of feel yourself drawn into it. And Gerald Kaufman was very nice and poured the tea and passed the marmalade and all this sort of thing. So then when it comes to being on the programme, there is a bit of you that think, no matter how dreadful the thing is that someone said, there's a bit of you that wants to sort of hold back, and you find your instincts to go, I can't be rude to this bloke, he passed the tea strainer. And you can't help it. And there's also this awful bit where sort of the Dimbleby turns to you, "Mark Steele, what do you think?" And there's for a tenth of a second that seems like an age, I wanted to go, "I don't know. I'm from Swanley Cod Bridge. I'm just a comic. What about ask him? He was in the cabinet."
There's a great in John Monson's book. There's a great bit where he's on the road with some Klansmen, and they were very polite and very nice to him. And he said, and I sort of felt guilty that they were going to find out I was Jewish.
Wasn't there a great David Frost thing that years ago he had Ted Ray? Do you remember Ted Ray?
Oh yeah.
And it was one of those things that was mixing politics, mixing politics and humour. And I think apparently David Frost came out with the guy and said, "Ted Ray, nuclear proliferation. Any thoughts?"
We're going to have to wrap it up, Rory, because we're halfway into the show. We've only had one guest and there's another 3 to come.
They're queuing up like planes over Heathrow.
Bremner, Bird and Fortune between the Wreck and Hard Places on tomorrow night on Channel 4 at 8 o'clock. Do me a quick Bob Moncas. I know it's in your past.
Well, I didn't. Well, we'll be back with Wipeout with the American forces after this.
That'll do me. This is the Sir Douglas Quintet. Thanks, Rory.